And then Admiral, I'm just gonna remember, I know you don't have slides, but I'm just gonna bring out some of the uh, yeah, just the map of the, especially later on when we discuss the grand strategy, just the first, second island change. Because I completely agree with you. The Philippines is smack right in the middle of the two island chains.
Mm.
Somehow, so that just tells you how unfortunate our geography is now, but also an opportunity for us to level up. No, so I'll just bring that out later on, and I'll just also share something about the influence operations from the Singaporean, Taiwanese, Australian standpoint. Para lang ma-realize ng tao, hindi tayo gumagawa ng kung ano-ano. This is something that a lot of people are dealing with. Okay, let's go
Yeah.
live. All right. I mean, record. Hello, everyone. Thank you again, Rear Admiral Romel Jude Ong. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me again, Richard.
Pleasure. Of course, previously we had the opportunity to talking to each other for a television program, but just in case for folks who don't have subscription to the television program, and since it has been at least a month or so since we last had extensive discussion with a lot of developments ngayon sa Yumin Shoal and some of the controversial issues that are coming out in the past few days, I just thought it's perfect to catch up with you again. So thank you very much, Admiral, for making time for us.
It's my pleasure.
Okay, Admiral, let's go right into the heart of the issue. Let me start with more controversial, right? So obviously, spokesperson Dr. J. Tariela has been in the center of a lot of public discussion nowadays. Now, obviously, we know he has the best of intentions. I think he had some legitimate concerns about, what is essentially influence operations. We'll discuss that shortly. But there are unfortunately also some people are twisting or misinterpreting or misconstruing what was said, especially the usage of terms like patriotism, usage of terms like traitor, etc. And that has proven a little bit controversial. And I wanted to ask you a question about this because after all, neither of us have a typical Filipino family name, right? Although there's
Mhm.
an I have the Foronda in me, and but I mean, personally, and also as a strategist, what is your take on this issue of patriotism, and also on this issue of weaponization of our freedom of expression to push essentially the agenda of a foreign power, right? Can we frame this? Can we make sure what is the proper way of like addressing this issue?
Well, siguro first off, no, I think the problem with for media capturing sound bites,
Yes.
it sometimes fails to properly contextualize the entire story. Okay, so you narrow down to certain words like patriotism and yung traidor na, but I think you can only squeeze so much narrative into a certain media activity. Okay, so Dr. J is coming from the point of view of appreciating the uptick or the increase in propaganda coming in from the those whose interests are from the other parties. Okay, so and to understand that, we need to look at, as you mentioned, the issue of sharp power, on the issue of influence operations, and those are not easy concepts. We as a liberal democracy, we're not by nature, we're not, we are a free and open society. So we're not really conceptually attuned to those concepts. No? Medyo mahirap gapangin. Siguro, number one, ilatag muna natin yung distinction between, number one, hindi natin kaaway ang China or yung Chinese as a people.
Exactly.
That should be clear.
Yes.
Or the Chinese community, if you're looking at it from the point of view of yung dito lang sa Pilipinas. Hindi natin kaaway ang China, hindi natin kaaway ang Chinese as a race, hindi rin natin kaaway ang Chinese as a community within the Philippines. Okay. What we're dealing with is the Chinese Communist Party. Okay. Yung partido na has dominated, is the dominant actually power within China. Okay. And hindi lahat ng Chinese are members of the party.
Right.
Now, one of the key components of statecraft nila is what we call influence operations. Okay. So we're familiar with hard power. Hard power is basically, that's the military component, the armed component. We're familiar with soft power. That's public diplomacy.
Yeah.
And it's par for the course. We're aware of that. Yung cultural engagement, people-to-people engagement, socio-economic activities,
Power of Hollywood,
trade and
power of
investments.
BTS, something like that. Like, yeah, power of Korean movies, that's soft
Yeah.
power, right? Yeah.
K-pop, that's soft power.
Exactly, yeah.
For the Japanese, it's their form of soft power is yung ODA,
Yeah.
trade and investment. So kanya-kanyang ano yan, kanya-kanyang style. But sharp power is totally different. It's a mix of soft power and hard power in play. The focus of sharp power is not actually to bring your culture to the other countries, but actually to influence or to manipulate yung another country so that it will conform to your interest, to your country's interest. So ganun yung sharp power. And the vectors of sharp power ng China, the Chinese Communist Party, is embedded in its organization, yung central committee, the party committee. Normally, we look at 3 departments. So you have the United Front Works Department, then you have the International Liaison Department, and then you have the Propaganda or the Publicity Department. So those are the key departments within the party that we look at in terms of projecting influence beyond the mainland China. Now, ang first, normally, ang unang object niyan would be, ang target niyan would be the Chinese diaspora.
So when you say United Front, meaning trying to unify supposedly all people of Chinese or Han, supposedly ethno-linguistic background under motherland China. We're not saying that's the case. We're saying that's the strategy or that's the goal of this United Front organization, right? Yeah.
It's their style of governance. It's their style. The United Front Works operates domestically muna. It starts domestically.
Right.
Okay, so it's remember, historically, yung China's never been united before. I mean, warring states period, etc. Even the early 19th century or so. Ang pinaka problema nila is how do I keep China united?
Right.
Kasi ang fear nila is warlordism.
Right.
Okay. Doon sa within sa laki ng bansa nila, very critical, very problematic para sa kanila yan. So, paloob muna yung focus nila. Then later on, palabas na. Because we have the Chinese diaspora, you have Chinese communities in other countries. So they're trying to also project yung influence nila muna within those Chinese communities outside mainland China. Okay. Now, ang ano nito, the beauty of that design is that particularly if I'm a Chinese family, then I send my children abroad to study.
Right.
Okay. I, as the parent, become the hostage of the party. If my children, if my children studying abroad tends to drift away from the party line or whatever, then the parents become the hostage. So that's one leverage. Okay. So, doon muna yun, naka-project muna within their own communities muna. Okay. Now, as a tool of statecraft, iba na naman yun.
Right.
Pag i-elevate mo sa tool of statecraft, yung United Front Works or influence operations, it's basically to influence another country so that target country will conform to yung policies ng China o ng Chinese Communist Party. Okay. So, normally, ang target niyan are the elites. Okay.
Right.
So, that's why we are talking of, we use the term elite capture. Okay. Or elite cooptation. Meaning, you try to look for the centers of power within or centers of influence within a target country. And normally you will find that in the leadership elite
Yeah.
or the economic elite. Okay, those are the movers and shakers of any country or any economy. Okay, that if you are able to capture their interest or their uh, capture their
Loyalty.
loyalty,
Yeah.
siguro, no? Then
But Admiral,
mas
this also
madali.
extends to
Yeah.
ano, no? Thought leaders also, no? It could be bloggers, it could be prominent journalists, it could be radio stations, right? I mean, elite capture is
Yeah.
not just economic business elite or political elite, right? My understanding is this is a much more diverse and multivarious kind of category.
Well, for ano naman, they have different approaches in terms of projecting narratives naman. No? So that's a totally different vector of United Front work. So influence operation.
Right.
That's through propagating Chinese narratives or CCP narratives
Right.
or messaging through media.
Yeah.
But normally, they in the case of the US, they have established their own Chinese media, in-embed nila sa US. Okay, and it's operating like a normal media outfit within. Ano.
Right.
And na-correct lang natin ng US yan lately when they required that those media outfits be registered as foreign agents.
Yeah.
Kasi they are in the US, but they're basically propagating
Yeah.
CCP narratives. Now, another one is yung through domestic media naman. Okay? And normally, hindi natin matimpla kung
Yeah.
ano yung motivation doon. It could be the domestic media. I'm not talking of the Philippines, in
Yes.
general. The domestic media may be because they believe in what the CCP stands for. Or maybe it's purely transactional yung relationship. We don't know.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Admiral. I mean, because it's not just the Philippines, right? I mean, Southeast Asia is home to the largest overseas folks of Chinese ancestry. Whether it's in Singapore, whether it's in Malaysia. Although in the Philippines, it's relatively smaller proportion of the population. So the idea is that if China is gonna try to mobilize, for the greater motherland or something like that, Southeast Asia will be a very important kind of area of focus. Now, obviously, before Philippines, you had Chinese majority. Singapore really raising alarm bells. I mean, just to share screen on this. I mean, there's this very important report that just came out now on Washington Post, right? The title is "In Singapore, Loud Echoes of Beijing's Positions," and that generate anxiety. Earlier, you had also people like Kosikan Bilahari, their permanent secretary, who said Singaporeans should be aware of China's quote influence operations to manipulate them. So, and then of course on New York Times, you had this report about wars grow in Singapore over China's calls to help quote unquote motherland. So it's not like this is coming out of nowhere, right? We had some of our neighbors, including Chinese majority Singapore, emphasizing their distinct Singaporean Chinese identity. And because there were a lot of concerns raised publicly by some of their officials like Bilahari Kosikan about some elements in Beijing trying to overemphasize the commonality in language and culture to essentially corral certain folks in the direction of certain geopolitical stance. And now obviously Singapore has felt very worried about that. And accordingly, of course, Singapore has passed a lot of regulations on social media and disinformation, etc. Now, obviously, Singapore is not your classic case of a liberal democracy, but if you look at Australia, if you look at Taiwan, right, a lot of these mature democracies indeed have counter influence operations, right? They have foreign agent transparency initiatives, or in the US, if you have to register, for instance, if you're more or less lobbying for a foreign power. So we don't seem to have any of those things in the Philippines, right? Any kind of relevant legislation, any kind of a relevant move in that direction? I mean, what is your understanding as a former armed force of the Philippines and the official and someone who's obviously being consulted by the government throughout the years?
Okay. First part, and this is curious, no? Mas most of the case studies review on influence operations, the materials coming, the case studies I are coming from the U.S. and Australia. They were the first affected, and the awareness of this type of activities in Southeast Asia is fairly new. It's fairly new. In fact, in my conversation with some of the active officers still in the armed forces, the general awareness is actually very small. Maliit lang. In fact, after I retired, before I retired, that was when I started studying political warfare.
Right.
Just before I retired, and I requested my colleagues then, just before I left the service, to just continue studying it because I think that would be a problem later on. Now, when I transitioned to the academe, that is part of my advocacy na to do more research, to do studies on political warfare, particularly on United Front Works and influence operations.
Right.
So, ang objective ko muna ngayon now is how to help develop that awareness. We're still in that awareness level because you cannot counter something that you are not even aware of as a problem.
Yeah.
That's yung dilemma. That's yung dilemma natin. How can you say that the snake in front of you is about to bite you when you're basically blind to the threat, to the problem. Okay. Now, in terms of policy, looking at yung best practices or lessons learned in other countries like US and Australia, I think we need a Foreign Interference Act type of law that would provide some protection. Remember, we had this we had this Public Service Act and the Foreign Investment Act, and there was a we're opening ourselves to be vulnerable to particularly
critical infrastructure. Yeah, it's a critical infrastructure.
Yes.
Yung negative list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at least Senate agreed to put a sort of a filter there for national security to vet to investments. But I'm not sure if may mechanisms in place actually to implement those because one of the critical vulnerabilities natin would be at the economic side. And we're all familiar with NGCP naman. What happened with NGCP. And of course, yung issue of race against the third telco. So those are things that are vulnerable, made us vulnerable. We may also need to look at...
sorry, Admiral, are you referring to like training of some of our officers with the PLA in Beijing? And are you referring to like investments by Chinese companies in like telecommunications and critical infrastructure? Is that what you're referring to?
I'm referring to yung critical infrastructure.
Yeah, okay.
And telecommunications and power generation.
NGCP. Sorry, I heard NGCP. I was wondering there's no problem. Exactly, which is what Senator Rafi Tulfo also recently has emphasized, and I think President Marcos Jr. has also expressed openness to nationalization, renationalization of the national grid. Sorry about that, it's because also Rafi Tulfo raised this issue about bakit pinapunta sa PLA Academy yung mga ibang officers natin, di ba? Walang matinong sagot yata yung mga officials natin.
Okay.
Although I have nothing against that of military to military diplomacy. I just thought you were just throwing out that idea for discussion.
Okay. If you want to address that, I'll address that.
Yes, please. Is it okay? For me, I don't see anything not wrong necessarily, except if there's an evidence to suggest something something fishy is happening. But what is your take on that? Because Senator Rafi Tulfo among others have emphasized that bakit tayo nagpapadala ng mga troops natin sa China sa PLA Academy? Baka naman mamaya kung ano-ano mangyari.
Well, as a matter of practice, we do send officers abroad to study. I myself is a graduate of the U.S. Naval War College. We send the people to Australia. So when the PLA sent an invitation, I think the armed forces agreed, and we do send officers. However, and I cannot speak for the other service. No, I can only speak for the Navy. What we did was made sure that we briefed properly our personnel who went there. Okay, you're coming in,
correct.
don't bring your if you're coming in from an office that is sensitive, leave your laptop here.
Right.
Use burner phones or whatever. Uh,
Due
when
diligence.
you
Yeah.
due diligence, when you go there, you are sterile. Make
Exactly.
sure
Yeah.
you are technically sterile,
Yeah. Nothing.
meaning you don't have phones or laptops that has information that can be traced back or that can be data mined
Yeah.
from your previous office, particularly if your office is sensitive in nature. So that is for the Navy. Then when they return back, we also give them a debriefing. Okay, what happened when you were there? Were you approached? If you were approached, what were they trying to?
Yeah.
Kung ganon, we do our due diligence in terms
Yeah.
of when we send them. Okay, there was a time that what we did was we sent actually intelligence officers.
Yeah.
Okay, para at least they also the terrain kumbaga.
Yeah. Clean the mines fields. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah, so para to gather also
yeah.
to gather information. I mean from socializing with your classmates, be it international or Chinese, at least you get to find out how they think or at least how they perceive things. So that's for that. No. So there's it's not totally bad, but you need to prepare the people you send there.
Right.
So later on kasi that becomes your potential back channel operators.
Right.
If if there's a problem later, sometimes if there's a contingency that comes in later, we have a ready supply of back channel operators, at least on the military to military side, who can work with the other side.
Speaking of
So
which,
that's the
yeah.
yeah.
Speaking of
Yes,
which,
please.
Admiral, going back to this, so did President Duterte need a kind of a debriefing? I mean, considering he went into the heart of the inner sanctum of the Communist Party just the other month.
Well, I think when I saw his in media, he went to visit the president Marcos. So kumbaga, I think that is his debriefing na. Kumbaga, he's informing the president what transpired during his impromptu visit to Beijing.
Admiral, sorry, I don't know, was there a technical issue for the recording? Could you just rephrase again on the influence operations very briefly, right? I'm sorry again about that. So, what is influence operations? So, obviously, we're not talking about people of just Chinese ethno-linguistic descent. We're not talking about the Chinese Filipino community. It's very unfair to just make sweeping generalization. At the same time, indeed, there is a kind of a conscious, systematic strategy by the leadership in Zhongnanhai today to try to create a so-called common front, right? And we discuss how Singapore, Taiwan, Chinese majority countries around us themselves are being very conscious about it. So very quickly, what are the influence operations and the three key branches that are central to China's strategy?
For first off, no, we must look at influence operations as part of the tools of statecraft of the Chinese Communist Party. So, and within the party, there are three departments that. Sorry, I took up.
Yeah, so you were mentioning the United Front department, for instance. That's the first one, right?
There are three departments that are we look at. Number one would be the United Front Works Department. The second would be the International Alliance Department. That's actually the one that works abroad.
Yeah.
The third one would be the Propaganda Department or the Publicity Department. Okay, that provides the messaging for whatever. Okay. Whatever the party needs to be projected, whether it is within their community, within their own population, or outside.
And
So
yeah.
yes,
And Admiral, you were also proposing that perhaps the Philippines should look at the best practices out there that strike a balance between democracy and national security by, for instance, looking at
well,
the Foreign Influence Act, right? And you were saying that the Investment Act and other things that we already discussed in the Philippine Senate, we're already moving that direction, and therefore we have to talk about Chinese investments in critical infrastructure like telecommunications.
Well, that's true. Number one, the Public Service Act has a component to it that requires some national security vetting for all foreign investments, not only Chinese, no? But of course we're looking we are wary of specifically on Chinese investments. The reason being, particularly if it is state-owned enterprise, okay?
Yeah.
And most of the Chinese companies are actually state-owned enterprise.
De facto, right?
Uh,
I mean, even if they are seemingly private, we know behind the scenes that there's a kind of a commissar there, right? That to make sure you toe the line.
no, not only that. For state-owned enterprise, there's a party cell within state-owned enterprise. So ibig sabihin, the Chinese Communist Party has its fingers dipped inside state-owned enterprises. So whether there is positive control or they're just merely there to make sure
Yeah.
to extend oversight, we don't know. But definitely they are present in all those state-owned enterprises. If you go to West Philippine Sea na lang, all of their ships there, be it Navy or Coast Guard, would most likely have a political officer on board also. So when you deal with them, you're actually dealing with two people on that ship. The ship's captain and the political officer on board.
The
So
commissar.
the political,
Yeah.
who make sure that the ship's captain follows the party line. Okay. So that's the duality of their chain of command. There's the political side to it, and there's the traditional military line to it. Okay, so that's how they're structured. That's their DNA in terms of governance. Okay. So we mentioned about the foreign investments. Then there's also sa media. Okay. Remember, for so long we have made sure that the media is not open to foreign investors or foreign ownership. But I think the investment act also allowed it. No? So we need to be careful with that. So in terms of legislation, I think we need, number one, foreign interference act like what Australia has.
Yeah.
It may not be fit perfectly with us, but I think that would be at least that could be a takeoff point. Pangalawa, I think we need to review our espionage law. I'm not sure, no. My lawyer friends are better aware. But I think our espionage law is also as old as our National Defense Act, 1935 ba?
Yeah,
Okay.
not
So,
21st century, clearly, yeah.
Yeah, so kailangan din siguro i-amend yun o revise. I think basically yun muna. No? Then we need a specific office to actually review foreign investments. If there's still, there's no one minding the store, I think it's a competency. You need the competency of somebody who understands the nature of business, but it's also attuned to what is our national security interest. So medyo it's a
Kind of
mix
like a
of skill
foreign
sets
investment board,
that-
right? Like what the US
Yeah.
has, diba? To make sure this is really for business but not some nefarious potential.
Yeah. Yes. So it's you're trying to mix totally two different skill sets, and I don't think we have an office that has that capability yet. So maybe they can look into that.
Yeah. Admiral, are you worried about this being potentially weaponized? Because remember, the whole point of talking about foreign interference is to make sure hindi ma-weaponize yung freedoms natin and platforms natin by those who are clearly towing the line of a hostile or a foreign power. But at the same time, aren't you worried that a new foreign interference act could be also weaponized against anyone with divergent point of view that may not necessarily align with that of the state? I mean, I come from the University of the Philippines, just across Katipunan. We have a lot of people who are kind of leftist progressive and very critical of American empire, and they may have you get where I'm coming from, right? Like, how do we make sure that it doesn't move in that direction? But as you mentioned, Australia, US, they have some sort of a good balance, especially in Australia, you could say. And yung anti-terror bill natin, di ba, drew also a lot from Australia. Like, how do you make sure na in our efforts not to allow others to weaponize our freedoms against ourselves, sharp power manipulation, we don't end up giving power also to nefarious elements internally to use against people with different points of view or a kind of a different variation in their political conscience, right?
Ito kasi problema natin, Richard. We may come up with good laws, but at the end of the day, whether it's good or bad depends on the level of trust between the governed and the governed, the
Yeah.
governing body. So it's kung yung social contract may break o may disconnect, then I take the example of yung anti-terror law. The premise for having that is good kasi it's trying to rectify the lapses or the gaps by the
Right.
Human Security Act of 2007.
Right.
Of course, may mga provisions on that were actually can be revised or totally tanggalin, no? But by and large, the intent of that would be I think good, well thought of. Ang problema, there's no trust between the general public or at least the certain sectors of
Yeah.
the general public and the ones that they expect to implement within government. Okay, and that was in the middle of the red tagging business that we were having during the previous administration. So medyo merong trust issue doon.
Mm-hmm.
Same dito rin if you're gonna put up a foreign interference act. It can be, as you said, twisted or weaponized in a way, certain way. So it has to be, it has to be, unless there's trust between,
Yeah.
even if it's a good law, it will never work.
Yeah. So we need also a lot of discussion about safeguards. No, I mean, of course, my concern also is the red tagging phenomenon or red tagging, paranoia or red tagging fears that a lot of people have nowadays for good reasons, and parang to bring in the Foreign Interference Act, and there's this kind of a communist element to this. You can see how this could go down the rabbit hole. But for me,
It
that
can be
should not prevent us
hamak-
also. Yeah, but that should not also prevent us from having good laws, right? Just because it can go wrong doesn't mean you shouldn't try to come up with something. But that's why the safeguards will be important. Lastly, on this issue of foreign influence and interference operations, what do you think about the argument some are making, especially in the media, would say, no, it all goes down to leave it to our, like, let the other side try to do whatever mumbo jumbo, whatever hostile powers out there. But there should be a marketplace of ideas. If there's some mumbo jumbo think tanks, fake experts, or trying to make pro China arguments seem as if it's a kind of a progressive argument, people can see that. Just interview them, just talk to them and expose them. All you need is sunlight. You don't need a law that tries to cast this in a kind of an espionage or treasonous light. No, just engage them and expose the argument, and that's it. What do you think about that kind of argument, the kind of John Stuart Mill marketplace of ideas argument? That
Okay,
that our
2
democracy is
points-
strong enough to take propaganda from the other side, no matter how systematic.
2 points on that. No, number one, if you look at the surveys, I think there was a recent one. More than 80% or do not actually believe in the alliance. Believe that we need to fight for our sovereign rights in the West Philippine Sea, and they believe in we need to modernize our maritime forces, be it Navy or Coast Guard, to address those security challenges in the West Philippine Sea. So, ibig sabihin, we are defending our liberal democracy with a comfortable margin
Mm.
that more than 80% of the Filipinos are with us. Okay. So we take comfort in that. The second point naman is I do agree with you on let them ventilate their points of view. Ang akin lang naman is minsan I cannot help it because I used to be with intelligence. So it's you have to know where they're coming from. Okay?
Exactly. I mean, is this an
So
academic argument or something mumbo jumbo, right? Yeah.
you have to know where they're coming from.
Yeah.
So is this a purely academic expression,
Yeah.
or is this something that is transactional in nature? Kasi if transactional, then medyo you have to follow the money trail. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
But if it's a purely like what we do, it's purely academic and it's
Yeah.
well, it may not be unbiased kasi we have our own leanings,
Yeah.
but it's coming from our own perception of what's of our worldview or what's happening based on our own perception. So, kung ganun naman, I think, as you said, the marketplace for ideas is free. Everybody can express even the most contentious
Yep.
uh, opinion. If you can, if anybody listens to you, then go and good. Okay. But siguro, tingnan lang natin from a temporal perspective yung trajectory niya. Kasi if you remember, Richard, we started this discussion on sharp power just before the national elections. Kasi we
Right.
were worried about the Manchurian candidate, di ba?
Or a new Manchurian candidate, just to be clear.
The Manchurian candidate. Kasi ang premise natin doon is, kasi ganito whether we like it or not, the center of gravity ng Pilipinas is the presidency. Not the president, the presidency.
The office, yeah.
Okay? Kasi once you capture that flag ng presidency, guho na lahat yan Guguho na lahat yung everything will fall into place. So you need to protect the flag. Okay? And that's the presidency. Ang critical vulnerability natin is our own bureaucracy. If you go by sharp power, no? Kasi hard power, that's clear. It's purely military objectives. Sharp power objectives, it has to be non-military in nature.
Yeah.
Our critical vulnerability is our own bureaucracy or our system of governance. Kasi being a liberal democratic country, it's open. Okay?
Right.
And since we are still, although medyo matagal-tagal na yung learning curve natin, we're still in that learning curve in terms of good governance. Medyo may mga konting defects in play. So
Right.
because of that, we have inherently some vulnerabilities within our own bureaucracy. So that's that's something that needs to be protected as well.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Admiral Ong, for shedding light on this issue. I mean, I'm just trying to make sure that we're fair about this, but let's also make sure. I mean, there are espionage laws. I mean, it's one thing for you to express a point of view because that's your academic, scholarly, or I don't know, progressive activist point of view. It's another thing if you're paid to say arguments in a certain way with a specific agenda of serving another nation's interests, which happens to be hostile to us. So there are clearly some demarcations there, that we have to look at. But what about yung mga useful idiots, yung tinatawag ng mga Soviets? Those who are willing to do it for free. It's like, there's no money trail, but they're still gonna do the job because a fellow traveler or something like that. Remember? Soviets had that term for a lot of, people in the West helping the Soviet Union for free. Yeah.
if you turn it around, baka they might also call us useful idiots.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a dangerous, exactly. Kasi, so I'd rather end on this point, diba? Which is, for me, this increasing false equivalence and whataboutism phenomenon. Like, whatever you say about, to mga pro-China, bakit kayo? Pro-US naman kayo. So, pwede rin kayo maging influence operations. You get what I'm saying? So, what is your counter-argument to that? Your counter-argument is that, well, it's not US that is invading us in the West, or it's not bullying us in the West Philippine Sea, right? Or you could say, well, US may be aggressive abroad, but still it's a democracy. There's some sort of accountability. There's some sort of openness. You cannot say that about another country. Like, what do you say about that whataboutism and equivalence? Kung China kami, di US kayo, di patas lang tayo. Yung ganyan na diskurso, yung whataboutism. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I can only speak for myself, no? So,
of course, yeah.
Kasi when I espouse something or an idea or a position,
both of us, right? We're just speaking about ourselves. Ang dami natin
yeah.
affiliations. Like, this is just me talking for myself and Professor Ong for himself.
Yes, speaking for both of us, no, I think ang grounding natin is we're doing it because we believe we are protecting national interests.
Right.
We believe in our country. We're not doing it for the U.S.
Yes,
Uh,
exactly. Exactly.
or we're not doing it for Australia or for Japan. We're doing it for the Philippines. Uh, and we're doing it in a way that we need to position ourselves and respond to certain stimuli from let's say the region or
Yeah.
the global economy, whatever. So at the heart of it is yung ano pa rin, ano yung para sa Pilipinas, ano yung para sa bayan. I think
Right.
yun yung grounding natin to. Now, kung nag-waiver ka na, kasi self-check yan nasa sarili mo, tanongin mo sarili mo, ginagawa ko ba to dahil gusto ko lang makimeron dito sa discussion?
Yeah.
Or dahil naniniwala ko na in my own little way, I'm trying to defend the interest of my country. Be it kahit hindi naman ganun ka lawak yung papel ko sa kabuuan,
Right.
but at least in my little corner, I'm trying to defend my own little corner.
Right. Exactly. Thank you very much, Admiral Ong. I think that perfectly sets it for our next episode where we'll discuss ayungin and a grand strategy for an emerging power like the Philippines. Para naman makita ng tao na hindi lang tayo nagkikriticize or nagkakaroon ng mga mungkahi, meron din tayo mga sarili natin visions and ideas about how to push it best for the Philippines. Thank you very much for that. I just want to also emphasize, no? Your name could be Haydarian, your name could be Ong, you could be Moreno, you could be yellow, whatever. It doesn't matter. Being Filipino and being patriotic has nothing to do with your ethno-linguistic group, etc. So that's why ako very sensitive ako whenever discussions about patriotism and all come out with potentially racial tinge, no? So thank you very much, Admiral Ong, again for this fantastic conversation, and looking forward to our next episode to discuss grand strategy. Maraming salamat, Admiral. Okay. Then now, let's go to the second part, Admiral. Isama na lang natin yung ayungin at saka yung grand strategy, no?
So we start muna with yung
Ayungin, kasi yun naman talagang...
parang doon na jumpstart.
Correct.
Starting point.
Fantastic. Good tayo, Admiral. You wanna drink tea or something?
I'm drinking tea.
Para yung paras tayo dito. Okay. Very Chinese. We'll drink tea, both of us, yeah. Thank you very much again, Admiral Romel Ong, for joining us today. Let's discuss strategy. And before talking about big, grand strategy for the Philippines, which I think both of us agree is no longer a small power, but potentially an emergent, if not already a middle power, let's talk about the Ayungin Shoal, because you were in charge of the Western Command, right, when the Scarborough Shoal crisis happened. So what are the lessons that you learned from back in the day when you were at the forefront of the Philippines defense of the West Philippine Sea, and then how does that inform your understanding what's happening in Ayungin Shoal right now?
Okay, clarify ko lang, Richard, no? So for the Scarborough Shoal, I was the task force commander then, so I was based in Northern Luzon.
Oh, Northern Luzon. Sorry, not Western Command. My apologies for that.
Okay.
Yeah, Northern Luzon, yeah.
That was when I was younger, no? Relatively younger. Then I was transferred, at some point in my career, I was transferred to Palawan. I became the commander of the Naval Forces West. So that's under the Western Command. This is the Navy component.
Yes.
So Ayungin Shoal was part of my area of responsibility then.
Right.
So those are totally distinct. Kasi in terms of operational commands, Northern Luzon Command is taking care of the northern part.
Yeah, exactly, of course.
Kasama yung Scarborough Shoal. Then yung Kalayaan Island Group or Spratlys Group of Islands, that's under Western Command. Okay. So yun muna yung
sorry. So to rephrase it, as someone who served in both Northern and Western Command and has had to deal with both the Panatag Shoal crisis and the Ayungin Shoal crisis, what is your take on the latest developments? My apologies for not properly framing it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Ang problem natin, we are always reactive.
Right.
In this situation. And I think in our previous conversation about the West Philippine Sea, let's look at it from the Chinese side muna. Kasi that's the only way we can reflect on anong kailangan pa natin gawin.
Yeah, exactly.
The Chinese has a maritime strategy that Okay, that will provide the operational design for their ambition, which is to project itself not only in the Northeast and South China Seas, even beyond,
Right.
okay, to the Mid-Pacific, then going to the north to Arctic Ocean, then to the Indian Ocean. So may strategy sila for that. Now, the basic element of that to execute the strategy is what we call sea control. It's a purely Alfred Thayer Mahan
Yeah.
concept. Okay?
Very American. Yeah, American British. Yeah.
Yeah, because the Chinese have no in-house, they don't have an in-house naval strategist.
Yeah.
So they borrowed the American. So if you look at the interplay of what they're doing sa dagat, it's Mahan.
Yeah.
It's Mahanian in nature. Kaya madaling, you understand Mahan, you will understand the design. Kasi it fits. Okay? So it's sea control. It's an interplay of a naval component, a merchant marine component, basing, it's important, logistics, then yung human resource.
Right.
Okay? They don't have, in previous decades, they're not even going to see as seamen. Tayo
Right.
yung dominant. Ngayon, ang layo doon na ngayon. Tapos I think I read somewhere today or yesterday na they even surpassed, I think, Greece in terms of yung shipping, commercial shipping as a flag carrier.
Right.
Okay, so they know they studied they did their homework. Okay? So we're confronted with that situation, and dito to effect yung sea control, they have the Navy, the Coast Guard, the militia, and
Right.
yung occupied ICL features nila, yung Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, Fiery Cross, etc. Okay? I think one of the problems naman natin is we tried to stovepipe things.
Right.
In-stovepipe natin, kumbaga, okay, yan si militia, yan si Coast Guard, Chinese Coast Guard, then ito si Navy. But sa kanila, they work together. They work together. So dito sa Ayungin, we see yung interplay. So I think, based on the report of the Coast Guard, merong PLA Navy doon on the scene.
Right.
As well. So you can see here that they have the Navy, the Coast Guard up front, and then they have the militia. And they're all supported by Mischief Reef, coming from Mischief Reef. So, sa atin naman, ano yung natin? What is Ayungin to us? Okay.
Right.
That's our mohon yung natin. If you own a real estate property, that's your mohon.
Right.
That tells you that is part of our EEZ.
Right. Pasok na pasok siya sa exclusive economic zone natin.
Oh yeah, so it's not even debatable na atin yun so you have this somebody na nag-i-squat doon within our property trying to claim that with no legal papers to support it. Okay. Ang problema natin ganito the only way we can hold on to that piece of real estate is to ensure that we have a permanent presence. Kasi under challenge nga to maintain the permanent presence. Ang problema natin, yung Sierra Madre, it's gonna go sometime. At some point, it's gonna go. I mean,
when you say at some point, like 5 years, 10 years, I mean, I just want to ask you, Admiral, what was the decision-making process? ERAP to, diba? 1999. This is ERAP. So, what was, from what you know, what was the thinking, state of mind when we said, i-ground natin itong World War II, BRP, Sierra Madre, and then, bahala na lang, no? And now the Chinese are claiming that ERAP promised them at some point to withdraw it. Like, what's going on there? And obviously, that was never sustainable. And given that was never sustainable, why wasn't there any concerted effort from all the way until Aquino and Duterte to make sure na meron tayong matinong platforms dyan, hindi lang yung roasted, tetanus-friendly kind of, Mad Max, water world situation? I mean, what's going on there, Admiral?
Well, you have to understand, nung unang gin round dyan, yung Sierra Madre is still basically a good platform pa.
Right.
Okay? It's still operating. Nag-ground siya. Of course, over the decades, nag-deteriorate. Okay?
Right.
Now, between at some point na hindi na siya habitable or medyo hindi na ideal, and today,
Na-stress yata
sorry
kayo sa
about
topic na yan.
Yes. I have a cough kasi.
No problem. Please go ahead, Edna. I hope you're
I-edit
okay.
out mo naman.
Yeah.
I-edit out mo naman eh. Anyway, nag-vacillate tayo eh. Kasi before I retired in 2019, ang projection namin 2 years medyo totally uninhabitable na siya. Totally deteriorated.
Yeah.
That's around 2019. So 2021 passed. Okay pa naman. 2023 na ngayon eh.
Yeah.
So mukhang matibay. Pwede pa.
Medyo, baka nung pandemic nakapagpahinga siya or I don't know what's going on there. Yeah.
No. But, I mean, you cannot, at some point, it will become uninhabitable. So, ang solution talaga dyan is to either, it's not to repair the ship, but to actually set up a concrete facility behind the ship.
Yes, exactly.
Now, whether that is a prefab or whatever, that's a technical or a civil engineering solution that needs to be. But that civil engineering solution will be implemented in a hostile, non-permissive environment.
Exactly. So it's,
Hindi yung
it's
parang
a
nagpatayo ka
security
ng bahay
military
mo.
issue then. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, number one, you need to create, you need to protect yung supply line between wherever it's coming from to Ayungin Shoal. Yung mobility corridor na yun, o supply corridor, you need to defend.
Right.
Pangalawa, you need to protect the the combat engineers that gonna work on that facility. Kasi it's not gonna happen overnight. It's gonna take months to finish whatever. So, then you need to look at how do I now deter yung potential harassment. Okay. So, there are too many moving pieces for that.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it will start with political will.
Yeah,
It will start
exactly.
with political will. Okay.
Risk
Okay,
appetite
tuloy na
kasi
natin
to
yan.
eh. Oo, risk appetite to eh. Medyo
Oo.
China could respond aggressively. I mean, Admiral, just a question, like, because some proposal right now is, baka pwede tayong magpa-escort sa allies natin, particularly the US, considering the State Department made it very clear na any attack, even on the Philippine Coast Guard, will now invoke the Mutual Defense Treaty. So, if it's just us, kaya tayong buliin ng China, babasahin lang nila yung materials natin. Panis na, hindi mo na pwede gamitin. But if there's a kind of a US presence in the area, a patrol vessel or a drone in the area, maybe magdadalawang isip ang China. Because we know, about a decade ago, the Chinese, during Aquino time, were trying to block even the supply of food and shelter, kaya we had to drop it from the sky, But when the Americans were over the horizon, medyo nagdadalawang isip yung China. So, I completely disagree with some of the pro-China mouthpieces here na, they have been so nice and all, kasi kayong may kasalanan, kasi pinipilit yung construction. No, there were really efforts to also block resupply of basic goods. But I think the Chinese realized that, hintayin lang natin para mag-dismantle ito. Alis na rin sila. Sila nang squatter sa sarili nilang bakuran, kukunin namin yan in a matter of time. But obviously, we're not gonna be fool enough to wait for that moment. We have to come in. Do you think it's realistic to have a kind of a joint or kind of an American or allied assistance in this process? Justice Carpio has already been talking about the Malaysian case, although I'm not sure it's completely analogous. But do you think the Americans have an appetite for it, or should we even ask for American assistance?
The point being raised by Justice Carpio is actually the Malaysians did not ask for help,
Yeah.
but the US came there just the same. Okay.
With
So there
Australians.
was no,
With Australians, yeah.
there was no, kumbaga, there was no public agreement
Right.
between the US, Australians, and the Malaysians that they will be there to protect yung survey.
Right, right.
So, the China cannot charge Malaysia with saying, bakit nyo tinatawag si US and Australia?
Right.
So, meron deniability. Dun sa ano yun. Dito naman sa atin, no? Kasi number one, we forgot to do something that would have made things not necessarily easier, but meron na sana tayong step 1.
Yeah.
Now we're starting from step 0 eh. Kasi hindi tayo nag-retain ng presence doon. Okay? We do the resupply mission, then we go back to base. Okay? Ang dapat doon, tinapatan natin yung presence niya doon 24/7.
Right. So yung fondasyon wala pa. Sana inuna pa yung basic steps para ngayon pwede ka na mag next level. And what you're saying is catch up talaga tayo on multiple fronts now.
Yes, kasi if we're going to step from step 0, anything we do, if we go to step 1, escalatory na kagad yung
Exactly.
narrative doon eh.
Yeah.
Okay? Kasi if we do the actual construction, obviously escalatory in nature yon. It's gonna create waves, at least on the Beijing side. Okay? But since we did not do yung step 1, we're going to start from step 0. The mere reestablishing presence doon is already escalatory from their narrative.
Yeah.
Okay. So the best dito is an incremental approach. We do the step 1 na. Whenever we can. Meaning,
Right.
tapatan na natin eh. They have 2 Chinese Coast Guard vessels din. Di 2 Coast Guard vessels tayo. Kung hindi natin kaya 2, di isa. At least merong isa. Then, salitan na lang. Okay. So, hindi yung parang iwanan natin. Kasi, ang labanan ng sea control kasi presence eh. Parang basketball yan eh.
Yeah.
Di ba? Pag lumabas ka ng court, default yung game. Okay? The only way you can stay in the game is if your players are still in the court. Wala tayo sa labas, nasa labas tayo ng court eh. Okay? So, basically, we defaulted. Because we were not present. So, ganun ang sea control labanan na naval presence ang basic doon.
Yun nga eh. Which makes you wonder, I mean, Admiral, again, I'm not putting this on you, but we had both Aquino and Duterte, 6 years each of them. Why not even the basic moves being done back in the day? Why are we waiting for Marcos Jr. to make the tough choice now? Tapos na yung reclamation ng China almost eh. 2013 pa yan, di ba? So, I'm just wondering, bakit ganun? Parang medyo sablay. Kasi meron tayong arbitration case kay Pinoy, meron tayong, I don't know, whatever, kay Digong na military modernization to a certain degree, Brahmos missile, whatever, which we'll discuss later on. But yung konting basics lang na minimension mo, yung mga just the foundations for some sort of platform building, it doesn't seem to have been considered seriously by both Digong and Aquino.
Again, you have to look at it from a temporal perspective. We simply don't have the ships then.
Okay.
That's why we had the modernization.
Gets.
And even now, we still don't have
The
enough.
sequence talaga, sequence. May problema talaga
Kasi
dahil
before,
yeah.
problema yun eh.
Correct.
So even if sabihin natin may political will ka noon, you don't have the instruments to implement your political will. So may ganung problema, may ganung situation.
Yeah.
Doon sa ano. So, andun yun eh. Wala tayong magagawa doon.
Yeah. Oof. So it looks like it's like a conspiracy of, conspiracy not in an intention. Conspiracy of circumstances, right? Like talagang.
It's the law of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And of course, meron din tayo yung Marawi. When I was there, that was at the height of when I was in commanding naval forces during the Marawi incident.
Right.
So ang game plan ko lang naman doon is as much as I want to exert yung natin yung presence natin doon sa area na yon. Ang ko is I must not create problems here in Palawan that will distract AFP resources to Marawi.
Right.
Okay, kumbaga hold the line na lang ako rito with whatever I have because the AFP's focus was on the Marawi siege. Okay, so ganun yung you have to make some calibration of your
Yeah.
tactics on the ground uh, with respect to yung what is happening in the other parts of the archipelago. So hindi ka naman parang Lone Ranger doon sa isang area, the best in the West ka ron, pero nagke-create ka actually ng problem para sa headquarters.
Yeah.
Kasi you're trying to elevate, you're trying to escalate something doon na may problemang malaki dito sa kabilang side.
Yeah.
So meron ganun, ibabalance mo yun eh.
Again, I understand where we're coming from. My thing though is it looks like there was huge scramble by China. Vietnam has also been doing its own militarization and reclamation. The Malaysians have had a strong position. The Taiwanese by 2015, you already had President Ma inviting journalists and American experts to drink water from Ito Aba to kind of prove supposedly na ito ay totoong self-sustaining island. So it's like everyone is doing something, pero tayo nasa korte tayo, no offense to the fantastic job that Justice Carpio and others have been doing, but for me the real fight was on the ground, and I'm sure and a kind of an operational person like you would have appreciated. But I also see where you're coming from in terms of not only we didn't have the vessels, we didn't also have the American commitment back then, right? It's really since later years of Trump and now under Biden that we see U.S. coming in and really publicly saying we're going to be with you if there's going to be attack on your Coast Guard vessels or personnel in the South China Sea. So, as I said, it looks like a conspiracy of circumstances and variables coming together, preventing us. But here we are, right? Marcos Jr., the president, expanded EDCA. To what degree is this also related with EDCA? Kasi ang basa ko rin dito is probably the Chinese will try to leverage their strategic high ground dyan sa West Philippine Sea to kind of bully us and say, well, if you want to have whatever you still are holding on to dito sa Kalayaan Group of Islands, baka naman gusto mo i-reconsider yung ginagawa mo sa Cagayan and Isabela na medyo lumalapit dun sa next theater of potential operation namin, which is Taiwan. Do you think that the Chinese may be doing this kind of issue linkage or trying to, as you said, di ba, pwede ka i-pressure dito para magkaroon ka ng concession or vulnerability done. Do you think they're gonna play these games or they're already playing this game?
Okay, dito Richard yan eh. When you look at the terrain, you have to identify what terrains you can give up.
Yeah.
And what terrains you need to die for. Kasi you may not at some point in time have the resources to defend everything. Ika nga ni Frederick the Great, he would try to defend everything, actually defends nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, dito, we need to be realistic in terms of Kaya naman sa akin, realistically, all the things that we occupy in the Spratlys Group Islands are not militarily defensible. I mean, realistically.
So ilan ba tayo? 8 ang hawak natin sa Kalayaan Group of Islands?
Yeah, 8.
Eight,
Ayungin
right?
is the 9th one.
9th with Ayungin, right? Although medyo labas kasi ang Ayungin, di ba? I'm talking about yung concentrate ng kakatabi sa Spratlys, di ba? So, 9 in total. Without undermining our position, although I'm sure the Chinese have all the information they need. Just for the purpose of our audience, ano yung mga medyo alanganin yung iba na medyo secure? So I can expect probably Panatag Shoal medyo solid na tayo dyan relatively. But what about the others? Yung Iroquois Reef for instance or yung mga iba, di ba? Juan Felipe Reef for instance, right? Yung mga ganyan.
Okay, if worst comes to worst, I will retreat from those areas. Okay, I mean
like in an
scenario,
apocalyptic war situation, right? Yeah.
I will, but remember, the reason why we are there, it's our political muhon eh. It's our political statement that we are asserting our sovereign rights in the areas within our EEZ and our claim in those areas outside of our EEZ. Okay? Based on the fact that we historically occupied them in the 70s. Okay? So those are our political muhon eh.
Right.
We're saying now, I put troops there or I put people there because that is part of the archipelago. Okay? But from a purely military perspective, those are not defensible. Now, kasi kanina you're trying to compare between that tapos kumbaga di-distract tayo and trade off yung what is happening in the Northern Philippines.
Exactly, yeah.
Northern Philippines is to die for. Okay? That's a to die for real estate.
Interesting.
Kasi if Taiwan goes, we lose our buffer state.
Exactly.
Taiwan is our buffer state to China. If we lose Taiwan, we're going to have a World War II scenario. Remember,
Katabi na natin yung China. They'll be staring at us through the Bashi Channel,
correct,
right? And Luzon Strait.
correct,
I mean, ibang klase na
correct.
yan. Next level na yan, yeah.
Remember World War II, the Philippines was attacked from Formosa.
Yeah.
One of the
Taiwan,
the
yeah.
axis of attack was from Taiwan at the time. And how did they do that? Airfield seizure muna.
Yeah, exactly.
They occupied airfields sa northern Philippines. Then they preposition yung aircraft nila doon. Then they attack Subic and Clark. Okay. So that's a to die for real estate.
Interesting.
Kaya
Interesting. Very interesting.
if you ask me to make
Yes,
a
like
choice,
if you were the defense minister now, what will be your advice to Marcos Jr.? Don't give up on EDCA in the north kasi there could be war in Taiwan. We cannot afford to have a weak soft spot underbelly there. Is that what you're saying, Admiral?
the only way to curb China is to disrupt yung strategy niya. Kasi right now, it's not being disrupted.
Yeah.
Remember, when in-announce yung EDCA about a few months ago,
Right.
doon din nagkaroon ng uptick or
Exactly.
taas ng tempo ng mga
Yung
influence
laser,
operations.
yeah, yung military laser, then now water cannon. So clearly may may one-to-one correspondence between the two. The timing seems to be
Yeah.
more than coincidence, yeah.
Hindi, what I mean is yung influence operations in terms of propaganda. Tumaas.
Lalo,
when
yeah, of
President
course,
Marcos-
that too, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, kasi we were counting eh. Okay, naka-4 na webinar na sila, tayo wala pang counter. So,
Wag na natin
Parang,
pangalanan, wag na natin pangalanan.
Ano,
Ang dami
wala.
nilang
Okay.
seminars ngayon, may mga may mga Brazil, BRICS currency, may mga ganyan ek pa.
yeah, so anyway, I mean, we expected that. So they were trying to demonize yung EDCA eh.
Yeah.
So makita, ganito kasi yan eh. Madaling basahin ng Chinese eh. Ang Chinese Communist Party. Kasi they are very vocal naman kung saan sila. Kung ano yung ayaw nila, that means they're hurting.
They're not subtle.
They're hurting. They're not subtle eh. Madali silang mabasahin. So,
Right.
when they basically threw the kitchen sink on EDCA, particularly doon sa Northern Philippines, now you realize, okay, talagang importante yun.
Yeah.
The more reason why we need to strengthen ourselves doon.
Right.
Sa Navy naman kasi, we already established that years ago.
Right.
That's why if you look back in yung developments in the previous years, we started slowly
Sorry.
putting in Marines doon
Yeah.
doon sa Northern Philippines. Precisely because we anticipated that even if the rest of the government does not believe in us, at that time, so we did our job. Meaning, we tried to put some presence there, at least,
Right.
kahit man lang parang masabi na hindi naman kami nagkulang in terms of trying to
Yeah.
voice out our concern doon sa Northern Philippines. Kasi that's our strategically blind tayo ron
Right.
sa Northern Philippines. Kasi we look at those areas as parang, okay lang yan kasi problema naman dyan, bagyo lang.
Right.
Sabi, okay lang tayo dyan kasi tourist spot yan eh. Walang mangyayari dyan. Okay. Kasi ang focus natin, nasa south. So that's our strategic blind spot.
Right.
Okay. Kaya nga sinasabi natin ngayon, we don't have the luxury of a strategic rear. Kasi it's all over the place na. We
Right.
have to look 360 degrees around us. Like before, we only need to look at two sides, the western
Right.
side at southern side. Ngayon, we have to check the north and we have to check the east.
Right. Speaking of which, I think this really brings us to. But before that, I want to ask another question. What do you think about proposals of Pag-asa being put under expanded EDCA sites? Because clearly AFP and Pentagon said hindi ito final list, pwede pa ma-expand yan. I know you kind of answered that by saying dapat mas focus natin yung mainland Luzon, what's happening with Taiwan. But do you think medyo a bridge too far, kind of too much na yan if we put pag-asa under EDCA. Assuming the Americans will be open to it, which I'm quite doubtful of based on my own understanding. What do you think about that?
Number one, we can do it on our own naman if we really want to.
Right.
Then the next question is, ano ilalagay mo ron? I think in the previous administration, we can criticize the previous administration if one,
Right.
but at least one of the positive outcome nung was yung nai-repair yung
Right.
airfield doon and naiayos yung berthing space for ships doon.
Right.
Okay, so for that at least we can applaud the previous administration. So nice. So pag-asa is a good staging point. Now the question is, anong gusto mo ilagay doon?
Yeah.
Do you want to put up a surveillance facility? Or do you want to establish an aerodrome for UAVs para they can do the patrol? Imbis na manned aircraft, we will just use drones. It depends.
Right.
Now, it doesn't have to be an EDCA site. We can do it on our own. But that has to be a decision point that we can, even the armed forces or the government can decide on.
Right.
Kasi if you make it EDCA, it becomes controversial.
So it looks like we have similar stance on this na wag mo na i-push masyado yan. So, but going back to the EDCAs in Cagayan and Isabela and all, I mean, again, without divulging some of the intelligence that both of us may have from our own contacts and all, how much of, kasi you can talk about an EDCA light, right? Which I think the Chinese are trying to push us towards. Like, tanggap nila magkakaroon ng EDCA, but they just want some sort of light version of EDCA whereby konti lang yung mga US troops, hindi masyadong developing facilities. But you can also think about a situation whereby dun sa Cagayan and Isabela, the Americans will be allowed and permitted to put hundreds, if not thousands of troops, Patriot missile systems, very advanced facilities. For you, what is the optimal level of American military presence under EDCA terms, under Philippine supervision, doon sa Cagayan, Isabela, considering what is emerging as a threat, not only in Taiwan, but also more and more dyan sa Philippine Sea area?
Okay, I think kasi minsan nagkakaroon ng misconception. Although I think we both understand what it is. No? But in terms sometimes the general public, particularly among the critics of EDCA, medyo minsan hindi ko alam kung sinasadya, no? But EDCA is basically a facility within a Philippine camp,
Right.
Philippine military camp. It's not an American base.
Right.
Okay, that means if it's a facility, we're talking of a building or a warehouse
Right.
or whatever. So it's not gonna be hosting that much U.S. personnel per se.
Right.
Kasi if you're talking of yung warm bodies, the mechanism for that would be BFA. Okay.
Right.
The EDCA is a mechanism for the equipment.
Right.
So we're not talking of warm bodies. Maybe we're looking at prepositioning of equipment.
Right.
If you're familiar with yung the Cold War, no, there is such thing as a U.S. NATO exercise. It's called Reforger exercise.
Right.
Reforger.
Right.
Or exercise return of forces to Germany. Okay. Kasi yung armor capability nila naka-preposition na sa Germany. Then they have some US forces doon, US personnel.
Yes.
But yung bulk ng troops are in continental US pa, lilipad pa nila.
Yeah.
The objective is they have enough there to hold the line yung provide the first line of defense to blunt.
Para may
So,
time
a
for
Soviet-
intervention. So you create
a
space
Soviet
for
attack.
intervention.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the Reforger exercise is to test yung gaano sila kabilis i-rapidly deploy
Right.
back to Germany. So nakikita ko parang ganun din. Okay? You're not gonna see preponderance of US personnel here, but maybe equipment.
Yes. I mean, speaking of equipment, are we looking at like Patriot missile systems? Are we looking at, some of the huge drones that could be applied for really hybrid warfare? Because a Taiwan situation will be way more complex than what we're seeing in Ukraine, which in itself is, quite something, right? I mean, this is going to be an
So,
amphibious operations, multiple fronts across the Taiwan theater.
if if I were the one to put up the list, I mean, I would request that they put in weapon system that can basically sink ships.
Okay. All right. All right.
Okay,
Kind of like
yun.
like submarine capability, like
No, no,
underwater,
no. Uh,
or
Similar
anti-ship
to
missile system.
where
The Daifun's DF systems, kind of like the Chinese DF systems.
kasi we're getting the BrahMos anti-ship missile system, di ba?
Right.
So if they have a similar equipment capability, that is the thing that I would request them
I
to
see.
preposition there. Okay?
Interesting.
Kasi it's we have to leverage yung advantage ng geography natin
Right.
to compensate for yung vulnerability natin or yung gaps natin. Our basic gap is we don't have the industrial capacity or maybe the financial resources to support uh, a very large fleet of ships to protect our archipelago. Okay. So we had to, instead of Mehan, we go to Julian Corbett. Okay.
So you're saying
Corbett is,
we do to China what China is trying to do to the US, which is essentially asymmetric capability development, right? Kind of our own
correct.
anti-access. We will China, right? We'll China in their own game, right? By
We
leveraging
need
our
to,
geography in vis-a-vis Taiwan.
correct. We need to find a way to fight, to develop the capability to fight cheaply.
Right.
Kasi if we run an expensive, if we design our strategy in an event, tapos very expensive yung system, so you're not gonna be able to execute the strategy kasi you don't have the money to back it up. Eh.
Yeah.
So you have to find a way, and that is asymmetric. Find a cheaper solution to a problem that you're confronted with. So, kaya nga, when we were in the Navy, ang solution namin was the BrahMos anti-ship missile system.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kasi
Correct.
that is the asymmetric solution to the problem.
Right. Pero limited lang yung batteries natin, di ba? Mostly for West Command and most... So, you think how many more batteries of BrahMos we should get? Should we go for the hypersonic missile down the road? The Mach 7,
The,
Mach 8?
the limitation is actually cost pa rin eh. Kasi if we, ganito yan eh. Hindi lang naman kasi
Right.
nang bibili natin equipment eh. Marami pa tayong ibang binibili. Eh. Kung ako sana, ibuhos mo na lang muna doon. Okay? Kasi we're trying to buy, kasi when you don't have enough money, example,
Yeah.
you want to go to the local sari-sari store, okay, and you want to buy some things, yung mga goodies ba,
Right.
okay, and you only have so much, okay, so you buy one of everything, or
Right.
just buy one item but many things. So ganun yung dito eh. It's a resource management issue eh.
Right.
Given finite financial resources, why just focus on specific items? So
Right.
it's a political will issue eh, or judgment call issue. You can easily acquire more batteries maybe. But it's an opportunity cost. That means you have to let go of some other things.
Yeah, I know this is where the bread and butter and the kind of trade-off issue comes into the picture. Now, let's go to the last part, which I think for me is my favorite, the best part, because I find you as a kindred spirit. And ako, I'm sick and tired of Philippines being called a small power. My goodness, we have as many Filipinos as Mexicans, and no one calls Mexico a small country. We are the 12 or 13 largest population in the world. We have top 30 biggest economies in the world. Even raw indicators or indices like the global firepower puts the Philippines in the top 35, 40. So, hindi tayo pipsqueak, right? Of course, we have many problems, many shortcomings, many budget issues, many kapalpakan, given yan. But clearly, I think both of us agree that it's time to speak about the Philippines in terms that is proportional and I think respectful of where we are and where we should be, which is a middle power, not necessarily, kind of a superpower that can dictate the terms or a regional superpower like China or even like Japan, but a country that kind of can hold its own and have certain degree of strategic autonomy and strategic agency. No. Now, speaking of that, of course, Admiral, in our previous conversation, we went to the geography of the Philippines, and we said that for a very long time, probably our strategic culture or lack thereof is because of our relatively, I would say, hospitable, auspicious geography. We don't have land borders, so our vulnerability to external invasion is nowhere close to where Vietnam is or many continental countries are. I mean, if you're China, also you're worried about Russia to the north, Japan to the east, India to the west, right? South, you have Vietnam. We never had that, but that insularity, relative insularity, and being protected by oceans, perhaps created a certain degree of complacency for which we're paying the price. Nevertheless, now things are changing, right? So you mentioned Mahan, that ironically, an American strategist in the 19th century talking about how Britain, the British Empire, maritime empire system could inspire U.S. and therefore U.S. eventually conquering the Philippines also and expanding all the way to Hawaii and Asia. You're saying that the Chinese, of course, are also drawing from that. So this is not Admiral Zhang He. That's not applicable to modern warfare. And Admiral Zhang He was not even Han Chinese. He came from Central Asia and potentially even Persian by background, based on careful research. But going back to this, what you're saying is that actually now our geography is so challenging that might as well we have to step up. And last time we were together, we look at this map of the first and second island chain, right? Which is quite troubling if you look at it. Like at the first look, it's like, oh, that's an interesting map, and it's like, wait, that's not very interesting. Like because if you look at the Philippines, we're kind of smack right into the center of it, right? I mean, this doesn't look very auspicious, right, Admiral? Like look at the
Yes.
Philippines there, exactly in the middle of a second and first island chain, which by the way demarcates what China wants to dominate for it to feel secure, for it to dominate Taiwan and its surrounding areas and push out America as far as possible. Because for the Chinese strategists, military strategists, you cannot really be a superpower unless you dominate your own region. And people like John Mersheimer, which many people are trying to cite nowadays for pro-Kremlin propaganda, actually he said that that the U.S. should deny China the ability to dominate these areas, and that's where Philippines is extremely important to the West, to America, but also important for our, on our own terms, right? Can you tell us a little bit about this first and second island chain and why this should be a wake up call and why this should not be a cause for depression or fatalism, but instead an inspiration for us to get the ball rolling?
Well, if it doesn't inspire us, at least it should
Shock us into
inspire fear,
action.
inspire fear or shock and awe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So dito kasi, and as I mentioned earlier, I think the initial part of their maritime ambition or maritime strategy is to assert or establish sea control within the first island chain.
Right.
Kasi that would create a strategic buffer. Kasi over the centuries, they've already established buffers doon sa landward side nila.
Right.
Okay, to the north, to the west, and to the
Right.
east. So sa south, sa northern part, that's Tibet. Yeah, they occupied Tibet. That provides them the buffer. They occupied Xinjiang. Xinjiang is their westernmost province. So
Right.
they're heavily positioned there. Okay, to the point na they're trying to change the culture of the yung population dun sa
Yeah.
Xinjiang. Then of course, sa north, that's a desert. Okay, so protected sila. Ang weakness na lang nila yung East Coast. And one thing that makes the East Coast important to the Chinese is yung 10 provinces that comprise your East Coast, pag in-aggregate mo yung GDP nun,
It's
tapos
like 90% of the GDP. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
ano siya, gawin mo siya, kumbaga mentally, at yung hiwalay
Yeah.
natin siya sa China. Those 10 provinces will become the third highest GDP in the world.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, ganun siya ka-importante. So, they need to protect that. So, the solution talaga nila is whether you call it the nine-dash line or whatever. I mean, any self-respecting major power like China will find a way to actually have to secure yung North,
Yeah.
East, and South China Sea.
And my strategic
So,
depth. And to have strategic depth. Yeah. Yeah.
correct. So, from an objective point of view, I can understand the strategy behind it. It's logical. Eh.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's also logical that they would do the United Front Force effort or influence operations dito sa South Korea, sa Japan, sa Taiwan, sa atin, Malaysia or Indonesia. Kasi you want these countries, if number one, if they can be my friends, better. But if they're not my friends, at least I destabilize them to the point that they will not be able to threaten me.
Right.
Okay, so yun lang naman ang option ko. So I mean, I do understand from their perspective the logic of their strategy from a major power perspective. Okay? So that's why we also need to be rational in the way we approach this.
Yeah. Yeah, we shouldn't
We need to
demonize
understand where they're
China.
coming from.
Exactly, we shouldn't demonize them. They're a great power that has an interest in protecting its own perimeters, right? And has a sense of ambition and sense of size and place. But obviously, the fact that China is not a democracy and an authoritarian system with some of the horrible things happening in Xinjiang perhaps makes it easier for us to demonize China. But you're absolutely right. We have to understand it from a patriot Chinese defense strategy standpoint. Hindi ka opo lang waiting for US to choke your supply lines and all if push comes to shove, right? So see, we are trying to be objective but not being influence operations, right? Like this is how you do
Correct.
it. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to understand yung ano niya, yung resource ano rin siya net importer din siya of resources eh. Hindi naman lahat ng resources available sa China. So that's why they need to reach out.
Yeah.
They need to reach out to Latin America for resources. They need to reach out to
Middle East,
Africa for
yeah.
resources. Middle East, of course, for the oil. They need to reach out to Europe for technology. And of course to the US for technology. So, lahat yun yung nag-interplay yung
Correct.
how we position itself eh. So if we understand that, then the next question is, okay, where do I position myself? Okay, ako si Pilipinas, where now do I position myself? Vis-a-vis that kind of major power in my neighborhood. I don't know. So, there is one point of view, and I think that's what our other friends are trying to point out. Manuwago na lang tayo sa kanila.
Yeah.
Okay? Kasi that's less stressful on our part.
Kaya ka, hindi, mukhang China to, doon na tayo, unahin na natin yung iba, di ba? If you surrender to them earlier, we'll get better terms. Parang ganun yung idea ng iba. Which is not necessarily hating the Philippines, it's just that it's just uber pragmatic, but obviously, I question the premise, right? But siguro ganyan ang inisip ng iba, di ba? Banwagon na tayo sa China kasi yun ang inevitable superpower. Which obviously it's questionable. Now, sorry for cutting you there because that's what Kosikan Bilhar and a lot of Singaporean friends would say is that China wants you to think that they're the inevitable future. So ngayon pa lang, luminya ka na, di ba? Para you get the best terms. But actually, if you look at the numbers, their population is shrinking, their economy is in trouble. There's nothing inevitable about China becoming number one by all indications. But never mind. But we're still talking about China's way of looking at things. Yeah.
Okay, so next question is, yung next question ko doon is, ako si Pilipinas ngayon, how do I position myself?
Yeah.
Ito yung geopolitical realities ko ngayon. So, it goes back to ano yung interest mo. Ano yung para sa Pilipinas dyan. So, and I think that transitions now to what you're trying to point out in terms of is the Philippines willing to accept that it's a middle power or not?
Yeah. So, Admiral, speaking of the Philippines, I mean, we're hoping to close on this. I know. Sorry, I made you too tired. How can the Philippines become the best version of itself in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What are the top 5 things we have to do? If there are like 5 ingredients to the Philippines being a self-respecting, middle-sized power in the Indo-Pacific, what would those 5 elements be? Just for heuristic purposes, simplify natin. Sabi natin, what are the 5 key things we have to focus on? From Marcos Jr. in the next 5 years, but also for the next 2 administration after Marcos Jr., whoever they're going to be. What is going to be our 10 to 20-year strategic plan?
Number 1 siguro, first and foremost, we need to take care of our people. Yun muna. Kasi that's a basic ingredient. One of the reasons why surprisingly mataas tayo sa military power index is because of our military age population. our young population.
Yung demographic summer natin.
Yung
Yeah, yeah.
yung demographic natin is one of our
Yeah.
advantages, both from an economic perspective and a military
Yes.
perspective.
Right.
Okay, we need to take care of our population. So that means, ano yun, public health,
Right. Right. Right.
public education. Okay?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Kasi, of course, if we do those basic things, then we have the population base to do great things. Okay?
You're right. You're right.
Uh, so I think that takes care of two, public health, public education. Pangatlo would be, and sana ma-improve natin yung governance system natin, but that's actually medyo mahirap gawin yun eh. Okay. Sana. But unless we do that, and that's gonna be difficult.
When you say governance, does this mean more democratic or more like in terms of rule of law and management of our resources? What do we mean realistically? I mean, we're not going to be Norway, New Zealand in the next 10 to 15 years. I think let's be realistic about that. But with the current trend lines, what is the best minimum version we can look at as a way to make the Philippines a decent middle power?
Siguro we need to accept the realities ng domestic politics natin in terms of the source of leaders where they coming from.
Exactly.
And find a way to work with those sources of leadership.
I mean, yeah.
Par for the cost, that's nothing you cannot do. You cannot do anything about
Exactly,
it.
yeah.
So, ano pa rin yan eh, it's not to get connected, kumbaga. Rather than just criticize and to connect to them. Kasi at some point, I think,
Right.
meron tayong makikita tayong ways of, yung we can agree on. Okay. Magbabalance din yung magbabalance out din yan. Hopefully, cross your fingers. Magbabalance out din yan. So that's public health, public education,
Good governance. Good governance.
Good governance. Okay. So I think with these three, okay ka na eh. Kasi the rest will follow eh.
But tactically speaking, right? Sorry, Admiral. Okay, I get those big points. I think all of us could agree that's important for everything, right? To deal with climate change, to deal with effects of nefarious effects of artificial intelligence. But now more military-wise, like let's say realistically we have $3 to $5 billion to spare in the next decade or so, which is not actually that much if you look at it, considering our neighbors are spending tens of billions every year. What are the constellation or package of weapon systems that we can look at? So I think you already implied we need more of BrahMos, right? So which makes India a very important partner. Is there like a squadron or two of fighter jets that we need, or naval fighter jets or warships? What are we looking at? Do we need a submarine for that matter? Which is of course a very expensive thing, $1 billion engagement at the very least.
Okay. Number one, for that, we need to appreciate our geography better.
Right.
Kasi we need to find a way for you to, before you go into weapon systems, you need to understand how your geography, how to leverage on geography muna. Kasi that dictates what weapon system are fit for that.
The terrain.
Now, since we are an archipelago in the middle of a geopolitical cold war.
Right.
Okay. Basically in the middle of it. So you're looking at, as I said earlier, 360 degrees. But we also need to be able to protect yung access ways to our archipelago. And those are the 7 sea lines of communication, archipelagic straits. Okay, so in terms of weapon system, leveraging archipelago, your geography, of course, yun nga, yung asymmetric solution ng BrahMos.
Yeah.
We may need to look at unmanned systems instead of manned systems.
So drones are important for you? Drones will be important?
Yes. I will give you an example yung sa Ukraine-Russian conflict.
Yeah.
The virtually non-existent Ukraine Navy was able to sink Russian ships.
Yeah.
Using drones.
Right.
So, that is also one way of, that's also an asymmetric solution.
Right.
Kasi drones are
Right.
cheaper. Okay?
Correct. Correct. Correct.
If you
Correct.
buy a ship to counter one ship, which is a symmetric solution, but you
Right.
don't have enough money for that, and considering that your adversary has an industrial capacity that can build ships like rabbits, okay?
Yeah.
So hindi mo kaya i-match yun. So you
Correct.
need to look at other items. So drones would be either for, both for the Air Force and the Navy, maybe drones would be a good thing. Kasi for surveillance and for uh, armed drones. Diba? Then we need to look also at yung cyber.
Right.
Kasi that cyber is something we are good at. Okay. But we're not investing so much kasi we're invested in other things, yung legacy capabilities that counterinsurgency.
Right.
So I think kumbaga, if you're a business concern, you need to look at, okay, hindi na kumikita to, dapat to, let go na. Or maybe ito, konti na lang yung nakikinabang dyan. Pwede na sigurong bawasan natin yung natin. We need to make those yung strategic choices in terms of resource management.
Right.
Very critical yun. Okay. Kasi we're not talking of weapon systems, pati yung force structure yung
Right.
yung forma ng armed forces po in the future. Is it infantry based or mechanized based? Okay. Let's say we're going to buy armored capability. But you have to look at yung threat scenario natin. Are we expecting an invasion
Right.
of the archipelago that will later on involve, let's say, tanks from the other side? Kasi kung wala naman, so why are we developing those kind of areas? Okay. Then, sa defense system of management, which is a mechanism for actually looking at acquisitions, we need to also look at yung eliminate redundancies.
Right.
Kasi over the years, we're buying things that have the same or similar capabilities. So if you want to go for expand yung with limited resources, you try to buy properly rather than buy everything.
Right.
So you look at first yung okay, ano ba yung nagdodoble, bawasan ko na lang yan.
Correct.
So those type of things.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this. I mean, the reason why I asked this, Admiral, because there was this very interesting study by the Center for New American Security back in 2012. No, the title is "Defending the Philippines: Military Modernization and Challenges Ahead." Just to summarize it, essentially, it was saying with $1 or $2 alone. Again, it might sound a lot to us, but actually, that's nothing in defense spending for a lot of our neighbors. You can get the kind of a perfect Justice League combination of, let's say, 2 modern warship, let's say, kind of a mini submarine, and then some sort of missile system, and that might give you the porcupine capability or poison shrimp capability. Of course, a lot has changed since 2012, but my sense is the kind of a modified, upgraded, or updated version of that study perhaps still makes sense as now we move kind of into the third phase of AFP modernization, because that study got a lot of my attention, because we always knew there's no way we can match the Chinese, or forget about the Chinese, not even the Singaporeans, right? But so para it was how to modernize the Philippines or give us minimum credible defense, not naman on the cheap, but like the sulit Ilocano way of doing it. So as an Ilocano, I love that kind of study, right? And I was thinking maybe we need a new version of that for 2023, 2024. That's why I ask you this question, like on the cheap with $1 or $2, like what is the realistic combination of things we can look at? So that's why I appreciate your intervention. But the last thing, you wanted to say something, Admiral?
Siguro if you don't want to go cheap, ang unahin ko is yung
Sulit
power
version. Sulit version na lang.
industrial capacity mo natin.
Right.
Domestic industrial capacity.
Correct. I agree.
Kasi if you don't have that, and you rely on our
Correct.
partners or allies for things, at some point magkakaroon ka ng supply management issue.
Correct.
Supply chain issue. So supply chain issue become a problem during the pandemic. It's also a problem in Ukraine. So industrial capacity.
Yeah, because you need maintenance, you need, you know what I'm saying, right? The backward linkages and all. And usually that's what I hear excuse from Americans. And they say, oh, we cannot give you the F-16 fighters or F-18 fighters, etc. Kasi hindi nyo ma-maintain yan, di ba? And we know that that's a concern also raised with some of the Arab partners of US when they were asking for, I don't know, F-35 fighters or some of the more advanced weaponries. Aside from, of course, the Israel aspect and all, which is a totally different episode. Now, last thing, dun sa apat, siguro pwede natin dagdag sa lima, no? Do we need some sort of a young Turk version, a kind of a group of strategists who push the Philippines in the right direction, post-partisan, non-partisan, a kind of patriotic, forward-looking kind of group of people within and outside the government, like essentially kind of the elder statesman, or not necessarily elderly, like you get what I'm saying, like kind of a modernizing strategic movement in the Philippines. Do you think that that would be important? If not
Yes,
one
that is.
Mahan, 10 Mahan of our own, yeah.
But you need, sorry, you need an incubator for that.
Right, exactly.
No, now, whatever that, what shape or form that incubator is, it could be academe, or it can be a government institution, I don't know. But
Yeah,
you need to have that incubator for strategic culture to flourish. Uh, para yung those that are become part of that institution, or part of that incubator. If you let them go later on, they will be in private sector, in government,
yeah,
in industry, in academia. And they don't have to think the same way, but at least you set them in the direction of, okay, looking beyond yung limitations that we have to work with
yeah,
in our current or previous generations. Okay? Na masyadong inward looking, or medyo lacks confidence. Okay?
yeah.
Kasi middle poweredness is also, you have to be confident.
Yep, exactly. I was thinking something like, speaking of Oppenheimer, right? Kind of like an institute for advanced study, right? You know what I'm saying? Like in one of the top universities, it could be you guys in Ateneo or us in UP or whatever, or it could be one of the BGC campus para medyo away from everyone. And then, you bring physicists there, you bring environmental scientists, you bring naval experts, you meet political scientists, you know what I'm saying? Like a 20, 30 group of people, senior, rising star. I think that's what we need, no? And you need at least one kind of regular director for 5 to 10 years, right? To kind of build this group, no? So for me, I think that will be a very important ingredient, a kind of an incubator for a middle power strategic vision and strategic culture for the Philippines, and a kind of a model of an institute for advanced study. I think that's really would be nice, an office in BGC. So just to throw the idea out, baka nakikinig si Gibo or nakikinig yung president ng UP Ateneo. But I just thought, Admiral, we need more of that, and then we can make podcasts there every day maybe. It's like about every aspect, like the nitty-gritties, technical issues, environmental science aspect. I can already think of the list of 10, 15 people, I mean, right off the bat, no? But I'm sure that's something that we can keep in mind. Maraming salamat, Admiral. Thank you so much, retired Admiral Ong, for your fantastic interventions. I look forward to joining you more on the record, because off the record we're always together in panels and discussions. So thank you so much, Admiral. Is there something you want to add for our audience? A lot of them are young, a lot of them are progressive. Is there something you want to tell them? Leave the Philippines or love the Philippines? Ano ba?
Well, I think at the end of the day, para sa bayan yan, you have to love
Right.
the Philippines. For the good or for the bad. Don't give up too easily. Kung ika nga sa military, hold the line ka muna.
Right.
Kaya pa natin yan.
Yeah. Don't give up pa yan. May mga challenges pa. Like mamaya na kayo mag-give up kasi wala pa yung mga totoong challenges, kumbaga. Thank you so much, Admiral. God bless. Thank you very much, and I hope we can continue this conversation in different platforms. Maraming salamat, and
Thank you,
God
Rick.
bless. Magpahinga
Thank
na
you,
kayo.
Richard.
Medyo alam ko napagod na kayo. God bless. Thank you. Alright guys, thank you very much for lahat ng mga sumusuporta sa atin. I really appreciate it. Nakikita niyo puro kami mga pagod na nagka-cough, but I just felt it's important. Yes, I want to talk about Jason's Diyos ko, na-arrest yata. Naku, na yung Jason's na yan, ha? Di ba dating GMA yan? Sa ano yan? Naku, kapuso pala namin yan. Hindi, but sabi ko, I wanted to talk about Jason's or something like that. And then napansin ko, wag na lang. Next time na lang. Medyo let's talk about something serious. We're still hoping to have also spokesman Jay Tariela with us. obviously I shared a link and kind of a snippet of my interview with him dun sa show natin on One News TV5. But I look forward to also having him on our platform para tuloy-tuloy itong discussion natin. Again, so last night, ang dami namin pinag-usapan, actually kaninang umaga, dami namin pinag-usapan ni Leloy Claudio ukol sa Pilipinas, our economy, our politics, etc. Ngayon naman, nakausap po natin si former Rear Admiral Jude Ong. So, fantastic guy, really smart guy. He's also now a professor of practice sa Ateneo de Manila University. So, check his works. Brave guy, patriotic guy, fantastic person, fantastic strategist, very and someone that I know really cares about the country and is looking for the next 2 to 3 years or so. Yan. So naka 106 minutes na tayo. So almost magto 2 hours na tayo. So thank you so much sa lahat na nag-join sa atin, lahat ng mga nagbigay ng comments, suporta sa atin. It's very, very kind of you. Thank kay Sol Beltran, kay Riz Ani, kay Ma'am Jocelyn Lomberio, kay Braf Pete. Thank you so much sa lahat ng mga sumusuporta sa atin dito. Thank you rin also dito sa mga sumusuporta sa atin sa YouTube. Thank you kay Rising Flag, kay Turtle Marine. Bakit pag YouTube galing mga pangalan? Salamat kay Ma Victoria. Thank you kay Genevieve Cabildo. Salamat kay Roy Samontanes. Yan, si Carmel, watching from Japan. Why gozaimasu? Thank you very much for joining us. Alright, ang ganda pala yung yung zombie movie na Japanese sa Netflix. Maybe you wanna check it out. Alright, thank you again for joining us and also thank you for joining us dun sa discussion namin with Lele kahapon. I'll try to repost yung mga videos niyan on all different platforms including YouTube and all, and also here on Facebook. Medyo ang dami natin ginagawa, so trying to squeeze in it. On that note, thank you very much guys and talk to you soon.